Okay, so like one of my thoughts from the lecture that they mentioned is that the Ku Klux Klan like being very pivotal in stopping Black Americans from progressing in society and getting an education and getting high-paying jobs. And I know that they were in history like they've hated more than just Black Americans. Like they hated Italians and they hated Catholics and the Mas and Freemasons. But I didn't know that it was like I mean I had some idea, but I didn't know that it was mainly Black Americans that they'd stopped. And he also mentioned that there wasn't really a period of time where Black Americans have had access to high-paying blue-collar jobs that don't require college education. And I knew that there were still like racial barriers that were holding them back, but I didn't know it was that serious. I thought like we were making some progress in that like department.
I would agree with you. I thought we were also making progress. I think from where we've come and like the beginning of like America and all the history of it, I thought that we've really made some progress and broke down some barriers, but like to really hear that it's still kind of at the same level is like so weird to me because I guess I don't really see that part of it, but it's nice to like kind of be opening my eyes to see what's really behind that and really getting a full grasp of everything else.
I was also surprised by like how recent some of these things were. Like he talked about like the massacre and like how the white mob looted and like Black Wall Street and whatever. And I actually looked that up and see like what happened like in the elevator or whatever. And it was basically he like they don't know for sure like 100% that like basically he might have just like tripped and like touched her arms and this whole like massacre ensued and I feel like some of this like history is like being hidden because I was never taught this in schools. Like a lot of these like massacres and they're even like trying to like rewrite some of that. So like you know how you talk about like the newspapers, how they said only about like the white deaths, and then they called it like a riot instead of a massacre. And I was just like, I was thinking to myself like, why aren't we being taught this in school? And I also like the same thing again with like the New Deal. Like we learned a bunch of that at my school, but we weren't taught like we were taught that like it was helping Americans and such, but it was really only helping the white Americans. We didn't talk about those parts that exclude like how he's talking about those like occupations that were primarily like African Americans and they were being excluded for that. And I don't know. I was just thinking this whole time, like, why aren't we being taught like the full story and like more about these inequalities and injustices?
I would agree with you. I think it's ridiculous that we don't know like the whole picture and we're only being taught from that certain perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the erasing history thing. I remember in like there was a lecture a while back. He was talking about like how Ohio State like this land was taken from Native Americans, and that history isn't being told. It's kind of being shoved under the rug, and I think that's like a bad trend that needs to stop. And I don't really know if I thought we were like ever since like the media had like Watergate, I was thinking of it's like the scandals are kind of front and center, but I guess not.
And it's kind of scary to think about like how much history like we just don't know and that we're just like not being told.
Okay, so my video and article were basically about how the medical system is still kind of impacted by slavery. They gave a lot of great examples in this and talked about a lot of studies that I thought were like kind of crazy. Um, Sorry, I'm just thinking over it. Basically, what happened was they used to do a bunch of experiments on slaves, and I think at one point in the South, over half of the medical journals were all just like slaves being experimented on, which is pretty ridiculous. This one guy, James Marion Sims, he was known as the father of modern gynecology. He basically like only experimented on slave women. And I think at some point anesthesia, it was like introduced in 1846, but he chose not to use it for his experiments because he believed that Black people did not feel pain. In the article, actually, that was something that they talked about a lot. How even in like modern day, some medical students and things don't believe that minorities like Black people feel the same amount of pain. I think in a recent textbook, actually, they had some scandal where they actually had in their textbook that Black people did not feel the same amount of pain. And they had to recall those textbooks and rewrite that because that is just not correct. I mean, biologically, we are the same. So how do we come to this conclusion? Um, but basically, my video was just about how Black women are still suffering today with these medical indifferences. Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die due to pregnancy issues than white women today. Um, and even back in the day when they were doing all these experiments and stuff, people were trying to rationalize this by using science and the Bible to like prove that races evolved from different origins and that we all like that we weren't all the same, that we came from different things. I just think it's like ridiculous. I don't really understand how we come to that conclusion that we were all from different things, even though we are the same. Like biologically, we're the same. I just didn't quite understand it. Another thing that I thought was interesting in the video is that during the civil rights era, one woman, she went to the hospital for a brain tumor and she ended up getting a hysterectomy. And there ended up being a lot of just like unrecorded medical experiments and just surgeries done on Black people in the South in the 1960s that they just were like, we can do this, whatever. And I thought that was ridiculous because what are we doing? Um, Another big thing was how sterilization was huge in like the 1900s and the beginning of that with the era of immigrants. Sterilization was like a huge thing because they thought poor and disabled people should not procreate. So there were a lot of anti propaganda against that, basically.
Okay, so mine was pretty much about this guy called Lanier Phillips, and he was born in Georgia around the time where like the Klan was very heavily prevalent, or like they were there, like yeah, um, and it was a time where they would like go out every Sunday and march towards like a neighborhood, and this one instance they at this time they didn't like furnish black schools or whatever, and that wasn't until 1939, and so people from 3 counties around the area had built like a school for to help educate those people, and the Klan like burned it down. And so Lanier Phillips, he thought, well, I don't have a future, so like I might as well just join the Navy. And so the only thing he could do in the Navy was called this mess attendants, and they would pretty much just attend to the officers, do like the dishes and laundry or whatever. And there was also this rule like around the same time where they couldn't get off on certain ports. Like there was this like agreement between some countries or whatever. And then one time there was, or not one time, but there the story kind of focuses around this one time. The story where their ship crashed into a cliff near Iceland, or not. It talked about Iceland and then Newfoundland, but it was a large storm and they were going to sink. Like the ship was taking a whole bunch of water, the water was freezing, and so the men were questioning whether they should stay on the ship and sink with it or swim to the safety on shore. But during this entire time, they were having this argument whether like, well, we can't go on shore, and so should we just stay with the ship or just go there? And so Lanier decided to swim, and so once he was on shore, he thought, well, I might as well die here. And eventually a white man helped him up and got him to the first station where they like cleaned him up and everything. And during this entire time he was thought, well, they're going to kick me out because of the color of my skin, they might like lynch him. And so when these ladies were scrubbing him clean, and they thought that they'd never seen a black man before, and so they thought the oil had just like seeped into his pores, and he thought, did I die and go to heaven because these people were taking care of him? And they like one of these ladies like brought him home and whatever to like eat and sleep, have like a nice place, warm place. And so that was in St. Lawrence, Newfoundland, and they like treated him like a human being. And so that kind of like changed his perspective about life, and he thought of himself as a human being. And so after 16 years of this, he wanted more than just to be a mess attendant. And so he contacted the Bureau of Naval Personnel, and he said, well, I don't want to be a mess attendant anymore. And so they said, well, we can make you chief steward mess attendant. And he's like, well, I don't want that. And he said, we don't think you'll make it through sonar school. You'll flunk out. And he's like, well, give me a chance. And he eventually became the first sonar technician. But after that, any contribution he made, he contributed to the people of St. Lawrence, those people who took care of him. And so I just thought it was sad to think that in a life or death situation, he had to think about whether or not he can go to shore to safety. And so to bring it back to the lecture or whatever, but there wasn't any opportunity to, at this time for that upward mobility that he was talking about in the lecture. So.
So my portion was from the War Department video. It was called "Don't Be a Sucker," and it was published around I think the 1950, maybe 1947, post World War II, and it shows a man who stands up in the middle of a square and is fear mongering amongst the people and telling them that there is an evil in the evil in America, and there are these people, these foreigners that are holding their jobs that don't belong to them, that they belong to Americans. And there's a lot of anti-foreigner talk, and the man is targeting different groups and saying that they are like the Catholics are evil, and the Italians are evil, and the blacks are evil. And there's this guy that is watching these people talk, and he's like taking in their information. He's like agreeing with what they say, but then they target him, and he feels like he all of a sudden doesn't agree with it. And this man sits down with them, and he's telling him, "This is exactly what the Nazis did in Germany. They would target groups and tell them that the other groups were bad and trying to take down Germany, and that like there was this master race, and it would pit the groups against each other, and they wouldn't trust each other, and then it made it easier for the Nazis to take over. If they hadn't like broke those groups up, then they Nazis probably wouldn't have been able to take over Germany. But because these people believed them, they were the suckers. They got taken advantage of, and the Nazis could break down the strong organizations. There was also no sign, like they said, like there all the truth was broken down. A man was talking about no scientific proof that there is any race is better than that one race is better than any other race, but it's convenient when a person belongs to the race that is pushed as the best and they believe it. Then, so some of the connections that I found here were the mention of the destruction of Black Wall Street with the racist white groups looking for a way to break down the groups they deem as threatening, like with the white girl in the elevator and the black boy where he was arrested, and then there was mobs that grew around the area and then burnt down the black community and burnt down that area and drove them out. It's similar to what the Nazi Party did, where they would go against the Catholics or the Masons, and they would take out these powerful organizations that could possibly stop them. And all their threats, they slowly would break them down. And that's what I think these white groups are doing. They see these black communities as a threat. They need to get rid of them so that they can't be stopped in doing what they want to do. And since Black Wall Street was so big, it was a very obvious threat that they needed to get rid of. There was another connection I saw in at the beginning of the lecture, I think, where the professor was talking about how his racist family members were talking about like how they could do it, they could get a job and do well in the world. So why couldn't black people do it? And I think that's similar to what the Nazis had done with like pitting groups against each other. They're all immigrants or they're all like minorities, and the minorities are against each other. Well, then it's harder for them to unite and get change to happen. And that's why the Nazis were so powerful. And I think that's like minority groups need to they needed to not feel angst or hatred towards each other because that makes them less powerful overall. And then the racist white groups can just take over them and do with them what they please.